the Scandinavian countries, at least perhaps the past few years, they've become more dangerous. But previously, they were the safest countries in the world for actually a couple of decades, at least a decade running, and they didn't have an Islamic society. So I think that's an argument for simply...
What is an ideal society for you?
Not an ideal society. They had a society in which you could... Basically, they had like lower murder rates and like rape rates and things like that. And they had a different way of setting society up, which clearly worked very effectively. So there are
you think there was less murder and less rape in those countries? Are you sure about that?
Not now as we speak today,
okay.
But there was a sustained period of time.
Because they definitely had problems like alcoholism, drug abuse.
Yeah, but there was a sustained
the other things that we don't actually see because it's become so normalized is things like pornography, things like fornication, things like adultery, which break up families, which actually disturb the peace in the society. We don't see this. So when they bring up this happiness index and all that, they don't count many of these things. So you look like, oh, these Scandinavian countries are really top of the charts, all the time, very happy. But when you actually dig in and look at the reality within the societies, you will see problems. Do you believe God is one? Yeah?
Do I believe God is one?
Yeah.
I think he mentioned something, I really didn't want to get into a debate, but he mentioned something that the idea that if you accept an omnipotent God, then there must only be one, because you could not have two omnipotent things, because if you had two omnipotent things, then one could theoretically destroy the other, right? Then if the other could prevent that destruction, then it wouldn't be truly omnipotent. So, logic...
Sorry, I wasn't listening, I was just fixing the mic, so say again.
Just basically, he explained something to me which I agree with, which I hadn't heard before, which was God theoretically must be one, because if we accept that God is omnipotent, then we must accept that you couldn't have two, because if you had two,
if you had more than one God, I see what you mean.
One could destroy the other, then it's not omnipotent, right? So I think that's something I had never heard before.
Because
I agree.
Polytheism does not make sense, because if you have two equally powerful gods, then let's say if there was a conflict of wills, say for example, one God wanted it to rain now, and another God said, no, I don't want rain now. So who's going to win in this case?
Yeah, no, I agree exactly. So
what makes sense?
You have to have one, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, what really makes sense is like monotheism, where you believe there's one absolute powerful God.
Well, I suppose it's predicated on the idea that God is omnipotent, right?
Yeah, of course. So that is one of his attributes, that he's omnipotent, that he's omniscient, So these are his attributes, and we have this clearly mentioned in the Quran and the Hadith about the names and attributes of God. Yeah? So, I don't know, where do you stand in terms of existence of God rather than whether God is one or many? I think let's deal with that first.
I literally had this conversation with Mansour 6 months ago, and basically...
Okay, let's refresh your memory.
he did persuade me, definitely. Yes. That argument, I don't think it's refutable, right? So based upon that argument, I think if you have an omnipotent God, definitely there must be one.
Yeah.
Where do I stand on whether God exists? I think definitely there has to be something outside of, let's say, our atmosphere, right? Which has
outside the creation.
And exactly outside of, because there has to be some beginning somewhere, and we definitely haven't discovered a logical, or not even logical, but an answer that we can theorize to it yet. So there has to be something, let's say, beyond our true understanding, right? So I think definitely God exists. It's just maybe how you define that is quite challenging, right?
Okay, so let me break it down so it's easy to understand, even without bringing in theology or religious books or anything like that. Just let's use logic and our rationality. We have a faculty of reasoning for a reason. Excuse the pun, but this is where everyone can come on board. You don't need to be a particular religion, or you could be even an atheist or an agnostic. If you're uncertain, unsure, no problem. But we know that the universe exists, right? So if I were to ask you, okay, if you look around within the universe, you see cause and effect everywhere, yeah? You see that everything is either depending on something, or maybe more than one thing, or something like that. So this is where cause and effect comes here. Like, we know that the universe exists. Now, if I were to ask you the question, where did the universe come from? What brought it into existence? Because we are certain it exists. So the question now is like, if I were to ask you, where did you come from? You'll say, from my parents. Where did the parents come from? Parents, and so on. You see? Similarly, with all of existence, whether it's a universe, whether it's what's within the universe, all of this, we see that everything is either dependent on something else, yeah, or it's self-dependent on more than one thing or something like that. And that's where the cause and effect also comes in. So if everything is dependent, then the question is, number one, where did the universe come from? Because it cannot just come from nothing. You see what I mean?
Which is where I think.
Yeah.
Which is where I think it's extremely challenging, if not impossible, to refute the idea of something that we may call God does exist.
No, I haven't even got to God yet. So I'm just asking for what you already observe. If you're questioning your existence and the existence of everything around you.
Something that created the universe must exist. I think you could say it that simply, I suppose, if you wanted to strip everything away. Because we know the universe exists, we know that something created it. Right?
Exactly, yeah. Now this something, could it be nothing? Number one.
No.
Could the universe come from nothing? The answer is no. Why is that no?
Because something must come from something.
Yes.
It's a weird thing to answer, really. But
actually, no, it's very simple if you break it down. Does nothing exist? Absolute nothingness.
No.
So if something doesn't...
No.
Yeah, you're right. It doesn't exist. Absolute nothingness is like, in everyday language, we use this concept, we use this for understanding. Like if I asked you, okay, what's in my pocket, and I'll say nothing, you understand what I mean by that, yeah? But technically, there's always something, isn't it? But when I say, did nothing bring the universe into existence, absolute nothingness, then obviously absolute nothingness doesn't exist. It's a terminology we use in our language. So monotheistic religions have a lot in common, yes? But then again, some of them redefine the monotheism, like Christianity, for example. For them, monotheism, the term mono means one, but then they redefine it as a union of three persons.
Was it the
Trinity?
Son, Holy Spirit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. No, I understand the idea that Muslims find issue with Christianity is the idea that you could not simultaneously have a Holy Trinity and have one. And that's an argument that Muslims use for why Christianity has a flawed premise.
No, the reason we say this is, even from the biblical perspective, is wrong. Because if you look at all the prophets in the Bible, none of them said God is three persons. Not even Jesus. In fact, not even his disciples and the people around him.
Okay, so would you say then that as opposed to criticizing Christianity as a monotheistic Abrahamic religion, you're really criticizing what is written in the Bible?
That's the source. That's the foundation of the faith. It is like asking a Muslim to believe in something which is not in the Quran and the Sunnah. For us, that is a foundation. You see what I mean? So if Jesus, the entire purpose of Jesus was to come and save humanity, one of that includes the message that humanity should receive in order to identify, acknowledge, and worship God. So in the life of Jesus, Jesus himself worshipped God. How can you expect him to be God? Because the notion of God worshipping God in a monotheistic religion is non-existent.
I suppose they would say that the Trinity is all the same being manifested in different forms.
They can say what they want. Show me from the Bible. You see, I'm coming back to the foundation of Christianity, the Bible. So they can make a claim like three persons in one being. This is how they define the Trinity. Okay? By the way, this was founded in the 4th century. This doctrine was established in the 4th century, like 350 years after Jesus. Jesus lived for so many years. Why did he never mention this? Was this not crucial enough to tell the people that God is not just one person, he's actually three persons?
So would you therefore conclude that, in your opinion, Islam is simply the correct interpretation of the Abrahamic monotheistic faith, and the Bible is an incorrect interpretation? Is that what you would conclude?
So we conclude that there's always been one religion, from Adam until the last messenger, who propagated this message.
And we're just aiming to find the correct interpretation of that one religion.
No, the interpretation is very clear. we are not interpreting something which is ambiguous. The clarity has been there in the very first commandment. So Jesus was asked by a rabbi, what is the most important commandment? And he repeated the Shema that Moses said. Yes, in Deuteronomy 6:4. He says, our God, the Lord is one. He didn't say 3 in 1 or 3 united in one. None of that. So Jesus himself was asked what is the most important commandment, and when Jesus repeated these words of Moses from Deuteronomy 6:4, by the way, this is in the New Testament, in Mark 12:29, and the rabbi then accepted and acknowledged that what Jesus said was correct.
See, I see your perspective.
Yeah.
And I don't have a horse in this race. I'm just curious.
I hope not.
I think...
I was beginning to understand, maybe you're still leaning towards Christianity or something.
No, I don't lean anywhere. I suppose what I'm trying to understand is, from my perspective, the dominant sides of the argument you hear are Christianity and Islam. You tend to see them coming together, trying to persuade you that each is right.
Yes.
Right? So I suppose I'm trying to emulate what a Christian might say to you. And what I would think they might say is, yes, God is one, we agree with you, and we believe that the three is one. Do you see what I mean?
Look, like I said, with all due respect, brother, it doesn't matter what they say. If they're unable to substantiate that from the Bible, then at the end of the day, that is just their claim.
So does the
Do
Bible I don't know enough about the Bible. So does the Bible try to imply that the three is one?
No.
Does it explicitly say that they're separate?
No, the Bible clearly says that God is one. The term one, when it comes to God, the term ahad, even in Hebrew, especially when it is in context to God, it can only be in one in number and not like a unity, like a family of God, or like a team, where you say one team or one family or even one couple. They do have certain statements in the Bible which says that the man and the woman, they became one flesh. But you see, that is not in context to God. That is in context to His creation.
So it never claims, I genuinely don't know, so it never claims that the three are one in the Bible?
Absolutely. And that's the reason the church councils, this doctrine was not established until 350 years after Jesus. If it was clearly in the Bible, they wouldn't spend so much time arguing about it in the church. There was a time in early Christianity, and there were two groups. You had Arius and you had Athanasius. They were both like bishops in Alexandria, in that region. Bishop means like someone who's the head of the church at that time. Yeah, it's a huge position. It's a very formal and like authoritative position. Both of them claim the opposite. Like one said, no, Jesus is equal to God, like Athanasius, and Arius said, no, he's subordinate to God. And they both are like, at some times, they were the bishops of the church. So this debate is going on in early Christianity. Why do you think that debate was going on amongst the people who were very close to, in terms of timeline even, closer to Christ?
Because there's ambiguity in the text, I suppose.
What is the ambiguity about? About God. Can you imagine the most fundamental thing in any religion is God? If the ambiguity exists in that, whether it's one, whether it's two or three persons, then it shows that the message wasn't delivered clearly, or they wanted to introduce something which Jesus did not advocate, which none of the prophets in the Bible advocated, which not even the disciples of Jesus advocated. See where I'm coming from? So my case is very clear. If you're saying that God is three persons in one being, why is that most fundamental thing not in your Bible? Why did the church take 350 years to establish that doctrine?
In this society, you then enforce all of the Sharia law.
By the way, when you say enforce, you see, one thing is that
it's legislative.
Yeah, even the legislation, it wouldn't be like something that is coerced or forced upon you, because you see, belief and faith come from inside, and if your self, if your nafs, if your consciousness is not in tune with that, then you're not doing it from the heart. You're doing it because of the fear of the law. Islam has never been. In fact, in the Quran, there's a clear ayah which says, "La ikraha fid din." There's no compulsion in religion. So you cannot compel someone, or you cannot force someone or coerce someone to do it. You can recommend it for them. You can suggest it to them.
If you don't want to strike fear into people, then how would you legislate someone who drinks alcohol in a society in which alcohol is
The fear is already there. Hellfire.
So you
It's already built in.
So then you wouldn't actually punish someone if they did drink.
No, we are not punishing. It is left up to Allah to punish. So,
okay,
so for example,
like you wouldn't you wouldn't imprison or fine people. For
no.
You would just
no,
say
hold on.
it's wrong, which means you.
If I was the leader of that country,
that's
okay,
what I'm saying. Yeah, you're in charge.
If I'm in charge, I'll say, look, in our society we don't need alcohol, or we don't need drugs,
so how would you
we don't need gambling.
So how would you punish the people who do those things without striking fear into them?
If it is outlawed, then yes, there would be punishment.
Okay, so you would imprison people and that kind of thing.
If there's a law, for example,
there would be fear.
Hear me out. In this country, if there's a certain law, yes, would you say that they are forcing the law upon you, or you as an individual should be aware of the law and not do it? Because, for example, take the traffic law. Yeah. Are you saying that the government of England is forcing you forcing you not to go run the red light, or you should know not to run the red light because of the law? And the law is that if you do run the red light, then there is consequence for it. Similarly, in Islam, there is such.
Which is force.
No, hold on. I think there's a difference between implementing a law and forcing it on your neck every time. So nobody's going to stand with a whip behind you that you didn't pray 5 times a day, or that you drank alcohol. If you're caught drinking alcohol when it is forbidden, when it is against the law, then you will have consequence for that.
What would your consequence be?
The consequence could be imprisonment, could be certain fine.
So I see what you're saying.
Yeah, so you see there's a difference between law and dictatorship. What you're talking about is dictatorship, which is very different from implementing a law, and if people break the law, there's consequence for it.
Well, dictatorship fundamentally is the idea of these are the set of laws under which you will live, and you have no ability or power to change them. So what you're suggesting is a logical dictatorship.
Can you change the law if you want it?
I can in a democracy.
So you think you can change the law, like allow me to run the red light?
If enough people voted with their feet to allow that, then yes, you could change.
Okay, so your system will be chaotic then.
Yeah.
So you're saying wait.
I'm not saying what you're saying is
wrong. Wait. I'm asking you from the practical aspect. You see, there's a difference between when you talk about democracy. You know,
I'm not saying democracy is the perfect.
Yeah, but I'm
simply saying that you are advocating a dictatorship. Not necessarily that it's
no. There's a difference, brother. There's a
difference.
difference. Look, when you say dictatorship, okay, most of the times dictatorships are unjust, oppressive. There's the rule of law. Yeah, but we have a difference here. We are talking about religion. We are talking about God. We are talking about a prophet. There's a difference. Even the morals that these democracies, most of the things which they make lawful or unlawful, they somehow directly or indirectly come from religion. Because atheists don't have a standard of morality. So you see, you're questioning the very source from where morality comes from.
You have a set of moral duties.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
And I do see, I see how, at least in your idealistic position, it can create a much more benevolent society. I see where you're coming from. So I suppose you could probably agree on.
Well, what I'm saying is, if you compare it to other ideologies,
you have a religious authoritarianism.
We have, you can call it that, but the thing is,
that doesn't mean it's wrong. I really see where you're coming from.
Sometimes, disciplining within a society, even if you feel that this is forced upon you, maybe it's for your good. If you have a child, and you can discipline your child either by hitting your child, which is normally not recommended, or you could say, okay, I'm not going to give you this toy, I'm not going to buy you this game, I'm going to take away certain things, certain privileges which you have right now away from you. So this is a way to discipline. But what is the disciplining for? It is for their own good.
And my final question was about basically the idea that, so in your system, people must live under these laws.
Yes.
And because they need to be led into, let's say they need to not be led into temptation, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that's more effective, or do you think that will create a rebellious society compared to a society in which you encourage people to believe and act in the right ways, but don't force it upon them? Because my only sort of, like, let's say, contradiction would be, if you try and force people into a certain legislative system, do you think they will rebel more than if you said, okay, we're not going to force it upon you, but we're going to teach you why it's the correct thing to follow?
I think
do you
the
think
term,
we'd actually have a better
the term you're using,
society?
force, you see, we have consequences in this society right now, which you call a democracy in England. Yes?
Pseudo-democracy.
Yeah, but still, it's a democracy. I think, look, every democracy in the world has its own flaws. There's no doubt about that.
100%. I think democracy is flawed.
Yes. So when you talk about discipline in the society, law and order in the society, I wouldn't use the term force, even though it can be forced many times. Because the force of the law is what stops or prevents a lot of crimes. If there was no such fear for the people to be punished.
So you do believe that that's more effective?
It is, yeah, because
allowing people to find their own path.
No, trust me, any society where there is a system or a law, if it doesn't have punishment or consequences for breaking that law, that system is going to fail for sure.
I definitely agree with
yeah?
that.
I'll give you an example, a very good example. I keep using traffic, but there's sometimes the best and the most effective examples. If there is no speed cameras, yes, most people will drive at the speed they want, yes, which they think is safe, even though in reality it might not be safe. But why do they slow down as soon as they see a camera? Why? Because they know there's consequence. But if there was no consequence, these people will drive at the speed they want and they think it's safe.
They would say it's their personal ownership to take that risk, but then you would probably say in return, you're actually putting other people at risk by
absolutely, and that's why I keep saying.
Therefore, you should require.
Yeah, that's why I keep saying that Islam doesn't cater only for individualism. Islam caters for you, for your family, for the society, for your neighbor, for the world, basically globally. So unless and until you do that in a society where there is a system, and the system will only be as good as the laws around it and the laws within it, and the consequences if you break those laws. Otherwise, it's a failed system.
The Scandinavian countries, at least perhaps the past few years, they've become more dangerous. But previously, they were the safest countries in the world for actually a couple of decades, at least a decade running. And they didn't have an Islamic society. So I think that's an argument for simply...
What is an ideal society for you?
Not an ideal society. They had a society in which you could... They had like lower murder rates and like rape rates and things like that. And they had a different way of setting society up, which clearly worked very effectively. So there are...
You think there was less murder and less rape in those countries? Are you sure about that?
Not now as we speak today,
okay.
But there was a sustained period of time.
Because they definitely had problems like alcoholism, drug abuse.
Yeah, but there was a sustained
the other things that we don't actually see because it's become so normalized is things like pornography, things like fornication, things like adultery, which break up families, which actually disturb the peace in the society. We don't see this so when they bring up this happiness index and all that, they don't count many of these things. So you look like, oh, these Scandinavian countries are really top of the charts, all the time, very happy. But when you actually dig in and look at the reality within the societies, you will see problems. Take that guy, who was that guy, Barrick, who killed 70 people, the Norwegian guy. Yes, look at his jail where he lives. Where he actually is imprisoned.
It's because they believe in...
It's like a bed and breakfast.
I know. It's
he gets to play PSP and...
It's because they believe in rehabilitation as opposed to punishment. And I know I'm not saying...
Yeah. But to me, a prison should be a prison, not a hotel room.
And I respect... and I don't think you're wrong, right?
Yeah.
I suppose I'm saying, like, they both have achieved successful outcomes and then outcomes that are less successful. Therefore, there are alternative interpretations that both have their merits and their downfalls.
By the way, Scandinavian societies used to be Christian. Now most of them are atheists. Are you aware of this? Majority of them. Even though they still have the cross on their flags, majority of their communities have become atheists.
And that's the thing. I'm not saying that they're ideal.
For
I'm
us,
saying that they have had some merits that other societies have not.
My friend, you see, for us, success is not just becoming rich and happy. Success is in the afterlife. So I don't know if you have given any thought to the afterlife.
Which is probably the argument that you would use against
that society.
I just gave, which is that essentially you would perhaps say it's overly hedonistic to only focus on your mortality.
True. And you see, if those people believed that there was no afterlife and that death was your end, you see, they and us, we didn't lose anything. we practiced the morals based on our religion, and we also died. And when they died and we died, and that was the end, then neither they lost nor I lost. So this is a Pascal's wager, which I'm alluding to. It's not perfect, I agree, yes? But you see, look at the flip side of that. If afterlife was there, and there is, punishment in the grave, and there is punishment of the hell, and there is a reward of the heaven, and there is going to be a day of judgment when God is going to judge everyone. If the flip side was true, who is taking the bigger risk here?
I see your perspective.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyway, thanks a lot, Sam. I really
appreciate
appreciate it. But people have to go now before the crowd comes and blocks us. But honestly, like I said, this is about the afterlife, which is going to be for eternity.
Yeah, I see.
And we don't want to take a huge risk of that. Because you see, I would rather take a risk for a limited time. But if something is going to be for eternity, then I would try to minimize the risk. As a person of intelligence, I hope you do the same.
I can recognize how you reached your conclusion. So
Okay.
thank you very much.
No problem. Appreciate it. Take care.
Have a nice evening.
All right. Assalamu alaikum. May Allah give Sam hidayah. May Allah give him the guidance to seek the right path and the truth and not delay for it. All right, guys. I think we wrap up. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.